Waiting for a few more people. Did you hear back from anybody that said they were coming who are missing, Aisha?
I did not hear back from our co-chair, Sean.
Okay.
I did not hear from Jim or Lyle or let's see who else. That's it. I did not hear from Lyle, Sean, and Jim.
Okay. All right, let's give them a few more minutes because it's just 12:32 by my computer. So.
I've been trying to work with Lyle and get what his thoughts were and calculations were, but I was not able to nail him down, even though last month he had said his Friday was going to work out. I had barraged him with messages to try and get in for an hour even, and that never happened. And so following that, then I sent him occasional emails. Now he just emailed me a few minutes ago and said, what's your phone number? I've been trying to reach you." And so I just sent him my cell phone. I don't recall having. Here he comes. Okay, good.
Oh, and Sean's here now too.
Cool.
So Jim is the only one, right?
Yes.
But sometimes he calls.
I'm the only one on the phone right now.
Give him another minute. So, while we wait that minute, we'll try and report out like we did last month about, the status of everybody's sections of the report. I am anxious to kind of discuss where we think we're headed after we do that. I kind of have some ideas, and I'm curious if my ideas are consistent with kind of what you guys are thinking. As far as generally where we think we will go with our recommendations. I attended a webinar. I forget who offered it. Maybe Product Stewardship Institute. And I found that really enlightening and kind of led me down a path that I'm wondering if you guys are thinking similar things or have other ideas. Oh, you know who's missing too? Chris Gulix.
Yeah, Chris is running late. He has another meeting that he's in right now. He expected to run late today.
Okay. Also, the other reason why I'm kind of anxious to discuss where we're headed and maybe jump the gun a little bit here is I will be retiring at the end of the year. And so I'm anxious to personally have a product to conclude my career with. I know it's not going to be a finished product, but I would really like to know what direction the group thinks we're headed before I retire. Again, just selfishly for my own peace of mind. I'm sure the chairperson will be, I will be replaced, the chair will be replaced, and I'm sure you'll be put in very capable hands. I'm not entirely sure how that process will work. I'm making some assumptions it will be one of the team that are already participating from DEP, but that is just an assumption on my part. So I guess after we go through the kind of lists here, I would like to have kind of just an open forum of anything you guys are thinking based on either your research or your discussions with others, or even what you came into this commission thinking. So again, we have prepared an introduction document, again, very short, very to the point. Moving on to the background, Dunbar was just kind of talking about some of the challenges associated with working as a subgroup. But you want to continue, Dunbar?
I do. By the way, you're too young to be retiring.
Well, I thank you for saying that, but I've been with the department 32 years. So.
Well, congratulations, but still, I stand by my statement.
I'll second that notion.
Yeah, I am. I mean, we have a retirement policy of 25, 55 in order to not have a penalty. So I have obviously reached those 2 milestones. I've done, like I said, I've done this for a long time. I still feel kind of young. I probably will move on to a different career because I think I still want to work. I just don't think I want to do this anymore. So the status of the background document, Dunbar, Lyle.
Well, so I had tried to coordinate a meeting together with Chris also and Lyle and me, but we didn't get it together during the past set, and I really want to get something together on that. So.
Yeah, and I have to say that Dunbar has been very persistent, and the fact that we didn't get together, I take full responsibility for. And so that's the bad news. And the good news is I've completed the analysis, both going rearward looking and forward looking based on the Energy Master Plan on an estimate of how many megawatts of PV panel waste and how many pounds of PV panel waste to expect every year from 2022 until 2040. And if you think that we should take it further into the future than that, it's easy to do that at this point. So that'll give us some looking rearward accurate and looking forward reasonably good estimates of the amounts of waste that we're talking about and when. As far as text, I have to confess I haven't done much other than an outline, and Dunbar has been really the leader in terms of getting us together so we can coordinate the text writing. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten as far as we should have. But I promise I will do better, Dunbar, and we'll get together in the next couple of days. I would hope, and get that text underway and get it done ASAP.
Great, I'm happy to help with that. Yeah, it sounds exciting results to look at.
Yeah, and today I have to clean it up and make it more presentation ready, but I'm going to get you that today.
So separate from that, I did follow up. I think Chris had put a link in about the French company that was doing the solar panel recycling, Veolia, something like that. And so I did follow that link and read more about their story. And It did link to a European Union policy that does include solar panels as electronic waste. And so I downloaded that report in English. You can get it in any language you want, but I'll probably send that to Aisha to add to the document library. And I don't know if it fits somewhere in the report. It's probably not the background that we're normally thinking about here in this section.
I do think
Yeah.
somebody mentioned that as one of the things that they could recommend, incorporating it into EWaste as an R2 or something like that. I think that was one of the options.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
Karen.
ISRI, who are the ones who administer R2, I believe. Is that correct? That they are talking about or had added solar panels.
Talks of it as adding it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Karen, I'm
There's a
eager
group
to
called
hear.
SIRI. I don't know exactly what it stands for, but they administer R2.
That's what it is. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, not ISRI. A lot of groups.
Yeah, and Karen, this is Lyle. I'm eager to hear the thoughts that you have on recommendations, and I've been seeking and getting feedback from solar industry people about what they think the recommendation should be, and you know, if new costs that don't currently exist are imposed, how to get that paid for. You know, for instance, is an assessment on every developer of a certain number of cents per watt that they have to include in their costs up front, and start collecting a fund, or just how to do that. So and actually some of the industry leaders are asking if there's any opportunity for them to discuss with the group or with DEP. I don't know if there is any such opportunity, but you know, they're aware of this process now, and you know, want to figure out you know what both what it is and how to structure payment of costs for it.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys think, but I think it's always a good idea to have the industry experts input. You know, it's why the department has such a rigorous stakeholder process. I'm just wondering the timing of that kind of meeting. I'm thinking, but open to suggestions, that perhaps if we had a framework with our recommendations in place, that might be a good time to have them come in and see how their input could fill in the details of what we're thinking. That's kind of how I think it might fit.
Yeah, well, the most of the solar programs come out of the BPU, and the kind of process that the solar industry is used to seeing is where typically BPU staff puts out a straw proposal preliminary to adopting a rule, or even preliminary to staff recommendations for a rule. And so the sequence is typically straw proposal, staff recommendations, then a rule. And the rule is almost always whatever the staff recommendations say. And perhaps that's a possibility here, where recommendations could be put in the form of a straw proposal and then a couple of stakeholder meetings. You think that could work?
Yeah, that's funny, because the legislation that established this commission doesn't speak to that, right? And I don't know, you never know if that's an oversight or if that was intentional. But again, I think the department's philosophy has has in the recent past been of inclusion, and therefore what form it takes, I guess, is really the question. So I have to run it up the chain, I guess, if we were thinking we want to actually share a document with other stakeholders, or if we are thinking of just having a more general discussion, I don't think would be a problem at all. So
Yeah.
Scott, do you have any thought about that?
I think we could certainly share concepts at the concept level and have industry input into that. I'm not sure how formal it has to be at this point. We could just timing is going to become an issue very quickly here to get some of this done. If we don't maybe do some of this in between these meetings, just to put something together and get some industry comment on it. I think we could probably do that on more of an informal basis than a formal stakeholder process at this point.
Has the DEP ever done such a thing as straw proposals in the past? Staff straw proposals?
The current strategy is more get them down to the concept level and then seek input into the concepts, and then write the rules from there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the current mode that we're in.
That's kind of similar, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, right, the stakeholder process that we use is generally for rulemaking. Although in SRP, they've also used it for guidance, to actually form a stakeholder group to actually revise or write a guidance document. And so therefore, during the stakeholder meeting for the rule process, we generally have a series of meetings on whatever the topic is. And again, like Scott said, at a concept level, not sharing the proposal itself. Actually, you can't share the proposal itself, because then some people could have unfair advantage if they had seen it and not. And then the formal, when the rule proposal goes out, there's a formal comment period and a public hearing associated with that. So it's kind of a two-part public participation process. Initially, stakeholder input on concepts, and then secondly, detailed comments received during the actual rule proposal. So because this is kind of neither one of those, we'd have to make up a process that kind of fits within that framework and that thinking, I think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we want to move down, Aisha?
Yeah.
So Joe, you did a pretty thorough description of the panel ownership issue at the last meeting. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I've been playing around with a few more slides to try to address some of the other topics that come about through the ownership. I have a feeling there's a lot of overlap between what Lyle and Dunbar are doing. I'm, dealing with some of the strategies, the landfill ban, the mandate, whether there are any public interventions that would help support the development of an infrastructure for the recycling. And as one, I don't know, forgive me, your staff person who saw the NERC, what's your name? I'm sorry.
Dan Clark.
Dan, yeah, Dan. Dan and I were both involved in the NERC symposium that took place last week, which really opened my eyes. I was involved in moderating a panel, and the theme was solar panel reuse, and we had some very interesting contributors. We had a gentleman who has a electronics recycling firm up in Vermont.
Yeah, was Robin Ingenthron from Good Point, and also Trevor DeYoung, who works for him.
Right, and then the third person was a young man from Accra, Ghana, who has been very hard at work at trying to dispel the notion that Africa is ill-suited for the recycling market, basically the reuse market, because they do have a very, very sophisticated electronics infrastructure, particularly Accra, Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me to think a lot about Well, gee, we've been talking about recycling, and from what we've gathered so far, it doesn't look like the technology is all that efficient or um, economically justified. So just on its own, just solar panel recycling on its own. As you blend it in with the other electronic waste, maybe there is a better trade-off. But the reuse option, when you look at what I'm sure Lyle and Dunbar can speak very effectively toward, the capacity of panels that reach either their end of their life or become available for disposal or for secondary uses after the upgrades or whatever event may stimulate that activity. The infrastructure for reusing them has not really been addressed in the context of our work, and I think it needs to be addressed more. That would be my takeaway from that conference, because it was quite eye-opening.
Yeah, and if I may add to that, having been on that, I think it was, and working in e-waste, I do feel like our automatic assumption with exports to developing country, however you want to phrase it, lower income countries,
Emerging economies was the use.
Sure. Yes. Emerging economies. I think, yeah, that we've had this assumption in e-waste, that everything, just sort of gets dumped somewhere and either burned or, has environmentally deleterious effects in those countries. And I think that these guys put together a very good presentation, both the recyclers in Vermont and this guy Emmanuel, who's in Accra in Ghana, have been, his company has been, or I don't know if it's a company or if they have a sort of broader group than that they had been working, he was saying, that things that are uneconomical to repair, here in Europe, are economical to repair in a lot of, these emerging economies, because, the difference between the labor costs and the device costs, that it's a much different economic calculation. And even, one of the guys from Vermont, Trevor DeYoung, who had put together this video, had on his house that he had a bunch of, cracked solar panels, and he was like, I'm still getting 60 to 70% out of them, and I can get these essentially for free. So, it was just, I think, to me, and I wasn't sure when that would be appropriate to bring up in this meeting. So, thanks to Joe for bringing this up, that, I do think that it's worth considering, especially given the, relative lack of recycling infrastructure for solar panels and, downstreams for recycled panels, that, I think that we should maybe take a little bit harder look at the idea of reuse. And, especially, with some of these, these guys were saying, gosh, for something that's 60 or 70 or 80% effective, even, that's reached its end of life here, that there are large parts of the world where, that is still something that provides a useful amount of energy, and that people are willing to pay money for. So I think, that's something. And one of the other things that had come up in that same session is that, they were predicting, and, I'm not the person with the most expertise on this, but that, they were predicting that it will become more and more economical to replace panels before the end of life in this country, that the lifespan, even for panels that are good and functional, because the costs are coming down and the technology is improving, that it may become increasingly economical to replace them early at, 8 or 10 or 12 years. And that, if that becomes the case, if there were, if the market were to shift that way with the modules, that then you would end up with even more in the waste stream that are in even better condition. And so keeping that in mind, that, that potentially, reuse, or, not even reuse, but continued use of panels that have been retired here could be economical elsewhere. And I think that's something that we sort of haven't talked about just at all. It is something that we should probably consider, because, instead of recycling.
What you saying, Dan? What I'm thinking about when you guys are talking about reusing the panels and sending them out to other underdeveloped nations, underdeveloped countries in need of infrastructure that these things could be beneficial to them. The thing that comes into my mind as I'm hearing about this is the carton, the hazardous waste rules, the rules to get it from here to there. That is going to end up being problematic. Also, thinking about just with regard to our own nation, things like what happened in Puerto Rico when the hurricanes hit and the whole country was wiped out. Like something in an instance like that, sending solar panels there to help get that infrastructure back up and running, that could be beneficial. And I'm not sure how that comes into play as far as with the carton rules, as far as getting it from here to there, but that also will come into play. And just recently we had that major storm in Texas where people was without power and things like that, like making some sort of designation for panels to go to a place like that to get it back up and running after a major catastrophic event could also be beneficial. But again, all that's going to play into those rules, into getting it from this point to that point, and the varying designations and rules from state to state. So that will have to be thought of in that process.
So
I would echo that. Dan, I just wonder if there was any conversation during that NERC presentation, whether or not these are considered Basel wastes?
Well, if
That
you're
subject didn't come
using,
up with the question that I was going to raise, but we ran out of time. So how do you maintain the UL rating on these
Yeah.
panels when you remove them, and who should be the people to remove them? This is really, it's in a very early stage of discussion, and that all these issues, what you raised, Aisha, and Dan, your points, they haven't really been addressed. I think it's way early in the sequence of developing, if this is a viable option.
I can
I think
I
just
can
one-
comment that.
if I could just make one footnote, Lyle. Dan referred to the incentive for upgrading. There is a study that we probably should take a look at, and particularly people like you, Lyle, and Dunbar. There's a study that was done at the University of Rhode Island, a PhD student or PhD candidate named Banaszak, I believe his name is Banaszak, and he calculated that with an increase in efficiencies of the panels from 14 to 18%, without subsidies, the payback for improving them from the 14 to 18% efficiency would be around 7 to 8 years. And with subsidies, it would be substantially shorter. So this idea of impacting the marketplace by improved efficiency and what that would do to the supply of used panels is a pretty significant element. Anyway, that's my footnote.
Yeah, I could just comment a little bit on what we see happening now. On that last point, we've begun to see the first instances of systems being repowered already, like big corporations with a big array that happened 15 years ago or even 10 years ago that they're considering, and in some cases already have repowered them with more efficient, more modern panels, and also the practice of reuse or continued use, and I like that term better, is already happening as well. And a couple of our board members have been involved in arranging for modules to be shipped to Africa in particular. I'm going there myself in January to Tanzania and Liberia to work on a couple of clinics and schools in each country. And so that's something that people are actively working on now. So I wouldn't consider it as impossible or that it hasn't, there's no experience or track record of doing it. In terms of shipping, if it's continued use of a useful product, I don't think that it should be considered waste. It's a valuable product and somebody would be paying for it, so it's just commerce. And shipping is still an issue because of cost, but the cost of shipping panels is very well established. It's a known quantity, and it's not huge. Typically, it's a couple cents a watt, which compared to the cost of solar panels is relatively small. Right now, it happens to have blown up by a factor of 10, but we all hope that that's temporary with this global supply shortage caused by the pandemic. So it should go back to that kind of level.
If I could a sec, just to comment on what Lyle just said, yeah, that is something that did come up with someone had asked about the Basel rules, and yeah, again, it was stated as long as it's for continued use and it doesn't ban reuse and continued use, so there shouldn't be a problem on that front. The only thing that was brought up, and I mean same with electronics, is to make sure that it's genuinely continued use and not being used as a cover for dumping, which, is something that has been seen not just in electronic waste notoriously, but in other waste areas as well. And so, always a concern, but it is certainly allowable.
I think this concept is really fascinating, and I think this is really quite in keeping with what this administration wanted us to go back to: reuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle in that order. So I think this is fits squarely in the reuse category, whether we call it reuse or continued use. I think there are challenges associated with it. I'm glad to hear that the transportation costs under normal circumstances are not prohibitively expensive to allow movement of the panels to places where they could be used, and the local population can benefit by that use. I'm not sure, though, and explain to me and to each other, how does this concept, other than an option for reuse, fit in this commission's mission? This seems to me, anyway, that it definitely needs to be a section in the final report, but I'm not sure that it falls within the purview of this commission's control as far as a recommendation. Am I missing something?
Well, let me take a shot at that, Karen. One of the things that I think the commission is being charged to do is to recommend state action. What, if any, action the state should take to facilitate either recycling or, in this case, reuse. And I think there is a role to be played. Certainly subsidies are something important in the economics of developing these options. Regulation of the waste, if we talk about waste, the options, landfills, perhaps the review, the regulatory control of transfer operations and recycling centers may be impacted by this option. I don't consider, I wouldn't look upon it as an option. I would look upon it as well within the purview of recycling. So it's, I don't consider it to be a subordinate role.
Yeah, I mean, at least at the very least, if within our recommendations, we could include a recommendation to, at least at the very least carve out explicitly that reuse would be allowed. And I don't know, if that's something we could recommend, but at the very least recommend that there not be a ban on, shipping to emerging economies for reuse, as that seems to be at least a possible market. So, I think recommending that be allowed could be helpful.
So,
Right,
so
and
I
I
wonder,
also think that, again, all of this fits into this, but how we designate the transportation of the material. But if it's not waste, it doesn't matter whether it's hazardous waste or universal waste, right? It's a commodity and therefore would not be regulated. It would be regulated just like any other new solar panel being moved across the country or across the world for installation. So
well, so let me add a different flavor to what the idea is. And when you draw the parallel to other kind of computer waste, where it is dumped in third world countries in not a very environmental way, when we would move a panel to a new location and use it for the remainder of its lifetime, it still comes to its end of life and then needs to be disposed of. And it might be then in a place where they wouldn't have the skills or economy to safely put it to into a recycling stream. So it is, this delays the end of life discussion.
and does anybody know, and this is just an offhand comment, if we predict the life of a solar panel to be 25 years, and we've even said longer, right? 25, 30. Do we know how long it could last and be a viable source of power if it was relocated to an emerging economy country? Does it have another 10 years in it? Does it have another 15 years in it before it does become a waste that that country would have to deal with?
I can take a stab at that. The typical degradation rate of a solar panel is about 0.4% per year, is what we found in practice. And the rule of thumb that's typically used by investors is 0.5% a year. So it's about the same range. It's getting so a number of the solar panels come with 30-year warranties with specific warranties for each year of its life that follow a similar path. So if a repowering, let's say in the US, were to happen anywhere from 15 years to 25 years, let's take 20 years as a midpoint, then if it follows that curve, which is what's expected, that means it would be at about 90% of its original rating at the 20-year point. And if that's the year it gets shipped somewhere to be reused, it would be starting out at that 90 and continuing to degrade about 0.5% per year. So it could easily have a 20-year additional life in the new setting, you know, if all of that holds up. You know, there's limited data with that length of time involved because the technology keeps evolving. And so we're talking about New Jersey shipping stuff that started being created in the main, you know, around 2005 to 2010 and after are when we've got significant quantities. And so we don't have a lot of experience on modules of that vintage, how long they actually last in practice, but that's the prediction. I mean, the first modern solar panel ever produced was produced in New Jersey in 1954 at Bell Labs. And I know the guy at NREL who has that original cell, right? The first solar cell ever made in the world. And, you know, he had tested it 60 years on and it was still putting out comparable to what it was originally intended to do. So these things really can last a really long time.
Wow.
Is it possible that we can set like a percentage, like say that to repower or reuse or refurbish the panel, its power must be at least 80% of its wattage or whatever that measurement that you guys use to determine the amount of power in it. Can we set something to say like, well, in order to repower it, refresh it, reuse it, the energy level or the capacity must be at least at 75%, or some everything is going to be a variance based on the year, the manufacturer, the watts on it, and so on and so forth. So wouldn't it make better sense to set a threshold for determining whether or not they could be reused?
Good point. It might.
So would there be a matrix that would, I guess, establish like a workflow and include a threshold, and who would be responsible to do the testing to say that it doesn't go to recycling, it goes to reuse? And now something has to be brokered in order to find an end user or consumer for the panels.
That's true.
Yeah.
These are all very important issues that have yet to be fully explored. But I'd like to go back to your original point, Karen, which is within the mandate. We've spent some time early on in the commission's meetings exploring the technology of recycling these panels. And I for one, haven't seen anything that's earth-shaking unless somebody has discovered a procedure, a process that I didn't see anything that made that economically effective. So how do we address that? If there isn't anything out there that's economically, technically feasible, how do we deal with the recycling mandate?
Right. I think Stephanie will have an update on that for us, but you're right. Right now, it costs more to recycle the panel than it does to dispose of the panel, and that's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
So therefore, if we could reuse the panels, that would be preferable. And again, I'm not suggesting it doesn't become part of the recommendations. I'm just trying to, in my mind, say, what is the commission's recommendation for either regulatory, statutory, or public sector action that could allow or even promote the reuse of this panels? You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a departure. No question about it's a departure from the original scope.
So let's scroll down. Maybe this is a good time to go to Stephanie
And Karen, if I might, we face the same problem with the food waste reduction plan. There's going to be, and it was mentioned, a certain list of topics that this group thinks have potential and can express some of those thoughts, but they're in effect they're going to have to be left to future groups to fully flesh out and to fully investigate it. You're probably going to want to draw a line around this one at some point. You've got a year to do this, and there's going to be a section that's going to say, you know what, we think there's some great potential out there. We have to leave this to another group. I know for food waste reduction, one of the proposals we have is and this is a legislative body, but was to create a legislative body, but you may ask the legislature to extend or, reintroduce this group to continue or in some way, shape, or form. There's value in the work that we were all doing that just wasn't able to bring quite to fruition at this point, but that doesn't mean another group can't pick it up at some point and continue it, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And again, I'm just viewing this as a more market-driven activity that, and maybe I'm just so entrenched in this statutory regulatory world that I am not able to translate this great idea to what this commission can do. You know, this may be more a outside market driven initiative that is in its early stages, and so perhaps again, although it should be an option presented in the final report, it may be, you know, live another day, you know. Dan?
For every
if I could just
that we propose, for every recommendation that we propose, after we suggest our recommendation, why we think this is okay, why we suggested, why we made this, before we conclude that recommendation, we have to identify what is unknown about this recommendation. So we go that route with the repowering and the refurbishment. We need to identify what it is that we still don't know, that's not known, like the unknown unknown. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Yeah. I was just gonna mention, you know, I just pulled up because I wasn't sure the executive order making this commission. And it does say here, you know, there is established the New Jersey Solar Panel Recycling Commission. The purpose of the commission shall be to investigate options for recycling and other end-of-life management methods for photovoltaic and other solar energy generation structures, and to develop recommendations for legislative, administrative, or private sector action. I mean, I don't know. To me, that would say we're covered. If you take that at face value, but.
No, I hear you. And again, I'm not totally dismissing it. It does fall within the purview of this commission. I'm just struggling, I guess, with the next step, like the concrete recommendation that we would make. Lyle?
Well, I was just going to make a comment that you made me think of, Karen, that we're thinking of this as recommendations in primarily a regulatory light and or regulatory and private action. Some of the things that other questions that have been coming up, some of the detailed question, like who would test the modules if they were going to be reused, and you know, if there's a recycling facility that needs to be built eventually, would one be built in New Jersey? And if so, how would it get built? Some of these questions are suggesting to me that the eventual solutions may be not just regulatory, but also legislative. You know, it's possible that legislation could establish a recycling facility in New Jersey and just state, you know, the state of New Jersey shall establish a recycling facility, and you know, could go to bid or what have you. It could establish a testing facility and a central entity for establishing shipping and reuse. There are a number of things where legislation, I think, could come into play. So I'm just wondering if we may end up identifying places where legislation would be helpful or should be explored.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that that is part of our mandate too, to go back to the legislature and say, hey, listen, this isn't going to happen unless there's new legislation, revised legislation, whatever the case may be.
Right.
All right.
Well, also, Karen, just briefly, there's, you know, the EP gives out about $1 million a year in research grants. There might be, we might want to recommend some of these topics are put before our institutions of higher education to pursue on some level as well.
Okay, Stephanie, do you want to give us an update on learned since the last meeting?
Sure. Yeah, so Daniel had arranged a meeting with ERI, but I thought was really helpful. So they're an electronic waste recycler, and they do recycle solar panels. And the way that electronic recycling happens now, or the reason why that solar panels are getting processed here, is because they have these shredders that usually are typically used to shred, I guess, the electronic circuitry in e-waste. And the important part is that usually for computers or other electronics, they remove the glass first. And then they can process the glass separately. And so this step is really important because their shredders are not really well equipped to handle glass. But in solar panels, because they need to withstand outdoor weather conditions for 15, 20 years, they need to be made really robust. So they have this polymer layer that is extremely difficult to remove. And so right now they're just shoving the entire panel into the shredders that are not designed to process glass. And then basically selling it as scrap material. And I guess in the process, you can imagine everything gets mixed up. So any silver or aluminum, even in this case, they send in the aluminum frames as well. So all of these metals that could have some value are getting mixed into the shredded material. And then you have to figure out a way to separate it if you want to recover some of the cost. But of course, the separation is going to take some money. And so right now there's no facilities in New Jersey that are equipped to do this, I believe. So no matter what, we would have to ship to other places. ERI in particular is, they do have a New Jersey facility, but it's not big enough to accommodate the shredder for solar panel recycling. They would need 27-foot ceilings in order to be able to do that. So I guess my conclusions are, the electronic waste recycling is not equipped very well to handle solar panels, but we have no other alternatives. There are no solar panel recycling facilities. In order to have a dedicated solar panel recycling facility, I think the big question that would need to be addressed is how to remove the polymer adhesive layer, which requires chemical treatment or high temperatures. It's going to be an expensive process. And so I agree with the discussion about reuse. Extending the life as far as possible seems to be the most economic choice. When basically you lose money by shredding these. It costs the companies money to recycle these panels, so they're recouping very little of the cost by trying to sell the shredded material.
This is David. Let me ask a question. Have you done any evaluation of the, what was it, Eco Materials? I think it's out in Ohio.
Yes, Echo. Yep.
So there's Cascade.
I realize they
Echo
charge
Minerals.
for their services, but they, have a technology that they've used over time to process windshield glass, which is essentially two pieces of glass with a plastic layer between them.
Layer between. Yep.
Yeah, and I thought that they did a reasonable job of really reclaiming things, but they're expensive.
Is this Echo Environmental or
his name
or Cascade?
Echo
Cascade. Cascade Environmental.
Cascade. Yeah, so I did look into them. They have a few U.S. locations. Ohio is one of them, and I think they remineralize the glass. But when I tried to look into the process, they have a proprietary process to separate the laminated parts. So I wasn't able to find more information about their technology.
When he summed it up to us, he basically, in a nutshell, said, we punch out all the glass and then we shred what's left. And we shred it down so small, so fine, and mix it in with the computer parts and the circuit boards. And then all that circuit boards and shredded up panel all goes off to his smelter in Canada. and then they remineralized that glass and repurposed it into other things. I'm actually blurring together both of the companies.
Yeah.
I'm blurring them two together. So Chris Stearns is from ECM, Echo Cascade, and Tommy McGuire was from the other place. Tommy is the one who said we just punch out all the glass and then we send that metal, that the metal and the plastics with our circuit boards. Chris Stearns is the one who said we remineralize, we make it into our roll beads, the insulation materials for roofing and construction. And yeah, I was blurring the two of them together. But yes, Tommy McGuire did say that they punch out all that glass first. They remove the glass first, and then they grind it down to a granular amount, make it very fine, and then Cascade is the one that does blends, but Tommy's company didn't do blends. They they do other things with it.
Cascade in Ohio is a glass company, and they excel at processing windshield glass.
The subsidiary of the Lubick glass.
So they have a way to remove the glass from the plastic.
And the recording of their presentations are available, right?
They are.
So
they will be on our library on the research page.
I don't think they gave away any secrets though. So
they did not. They was very careful.
And I think it would still cost them money, right? So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was just wondering if Stephanie had a chance to look into it anymore. That's all.
No, the only reference I found was saying it was proprietary. So
yeah.
Unfortunately not. Either it's a heating process. So I guess there are a few ways you can burn off the plastic. You can do that in a oxygen poor environment. For pyrolysis, you can do a chemical treatment, but those are really slow, and then you have a lot of waste. And there's some physical delamination processes. So I don't know which one they're using though.
Okay.
That might be an opportunity to seek grants, perhaps federal grants. The Federal Department of Energy has a big new push in the Biden administration to do waste to fuels and waste to energy. And if these things work with pyrolysis, as you were saying, Stephanie, pyrolysis results in a syngas, and syngas can be very, very easily made into fuels like methanol, ethanol, even gasoline. So that might be something where a research grant could be helpful.
So speaking with a materials background, I know a fair amount about glass manufacturing, and so it's such a high temperature process that if you're grinding up a module and then throwing it in among the other precursors, then probably it would burn away the EVA or other polymer adhesive layers, and you would, and to the extent that that might have some energy combustion value, then it would be offsetting some fuel use that you'd need for heating it up anyway. So it's probably, a glass company is probably very well suited to do this as economically as anyone.
I guess it depends on when in what stage of the process will you do this. I think the earlier that you shred, the harder it is to recoup valuable materials. It just gets so diluted in the material. So if you can remove the EVA before glass processing, then that would allow you to then isolate the silicon and the metals.
Yeah.
And I think that was the basis of the Japanese technology you had shown us earlier. They were using
Yes.
this process to.
Yeah, they use a hot doctor blade. So they basically heat it, and so they're melting the EVA at the interface, and then yeah, but it would be $1 million, I guess, for a machine to do this. And that's only, I think that's only, I can't remember. There's also the aluminum frame removal. So right now ERI is just shoving the aluminum frame into the shredder as well. But that one, that can be removed beforehand. They have a machine to do that too. So, but it's quite expensive.
Do you know, Stephanie or Dunbar, if typical metals smelters that might reclaim copper from printed circuit boards, for example, do they use glass as a fluxing agent at all?
Dunbar, I think you're muted. I have no idea, so.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. No, I doubt that I would be needing the glass in the metal smelting. It would be pretty much inert and not interacting. It would be something they want to get rid of.
So just slag pot. Well, so it wouldn't be attractive to them for any reason.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I read under clean light recycling that when they remove silver and copper from the panels, they use silica. They load it into the reactor furnace as for flux, but I didn't really understand what that meant. It was in one of their brochures. I can put it in the chat. Oh, that's not a link.
Great. Let's scroll down. Chris just joined. So I was wondering if you.
Sorry, I'm late.
Yeah, no problem. Do you want to let us know what you've been up to for since the last meeting?
Just on our side, trying to get some of the background information done from a PSE&G standpoint, just trying to get the updated numbers and materials, comparing our waste panels over the last 5 years to see how they're increasing and decreasing, and just getting some statistics on our the number of panels we have in service on our arrays now too that we would be responsible for. Just trying to give some utility flavor to the background side. So I should have that information this week, and I'll be able to summarize it for the group.
Right, and Sean, do you have anything to update us with?
Looks like Illinois won't be finalizing their white paper. They've actually revised their website, and they're soliciting for more participants to attend to be included in their large working group to come up with what we're doing, recommendations for the state to include in either legislation and or regulations. So the only thing that I do have that is something is what North Carolina is doing, but there's been no update on the regulations that they're supposed to be either working on or close to completing pursuant to the legislation directing them to do that. So I just keep surfing and making calls, and so far it's we're moving forward.
And Dave?
Yes, I've been working with Evelyn Butler at SIA, who has told me she would put together materials on both the EU and Japan. She told me last Friday that she would have something this morning, and then this morning I learned she had some computer problems she is now over the weekend, and she is now, I guess, reformatting or preparing that report. So I think I should have something within a day or so to send on. She sends her apologies.
Okay. Am I missing anybody? Aisha, Jim never joined, correct?
He did not.
So I guess I'd like to open the floor now to kind of general ideas of where we think we will go with recommendations. And I'm saying kind of anything goes here. This is just for discussion purposes. I think what I'm hearing from the group is reusing these panels, repowering these panels, and continuation of use. Seems like we have a consensus that that is the most cost-effective and environmentally protective recommendation. Now, again, how far this commission can take that recommendation is a different discussion. But other than that, if I go around the floor, starting with you, Joe, what do you have any ideas on where the commission should head with its recommendations?
Thank you. Ideas, I probably have ideas where it may not want to go. The one thing that I would think they would not want to go to is a landfill ban at this point, because it seems to be that would be something done in a vacuum without understanding context for a landfill ban. That just makes no sense. I've been thinking about it a long time. Landfill bans are good to stimulate technology that's out there that would be competing with it economically. And we did that in the resource recovery field. We tried, when I was involved in that heavily years ago, many years ago. Landfill bans are kind of useful for obvious reasons, hazardous materials, things that are obnoxious to the environment. But these devices don't appear to fall within that realm. So I think that's one area that I would be very cautious about treading toward. Mandates, mandates I'm leery of. Incentives for reuse and recycling, I think, is a much more promising line. I mean, one of the reasons why solar panels have been adopted so quickly has been the incentives, the financial incentives, the investment incentives. I can't think of too many places where you can get a 30% investment tax credit if you put in the capital cost, and that's really been the incentive. And that those incentives, financial incentives, are slowly being reduced over the coming years, but perhaps with the Biden administration's emphasis on renewables, that may stop and maybe become more enhanced. I don't know, Lyle, you sound like you keep on top of that stuff, but I think the financial incentives, if the state can come forth with a toolkit on that could be very promising to both identifying the ability to improve, repower, move up, improve the efficiencies, and at the same time provide a marketing structure, infrastructure for the reuse and repair. But the right to repair is an important concept that should be looked at carefully. Right to repair these panels, and again with the proper proper certifications and evaluations, I think that's a direction that could be promising.
And are you thinking any of this in the form of an extended product responsibility or an advanced recovery fee, or you think the financial incentives need to come strictly from the government?
I can't claim any insight on that, Karen. I think I know what they are, and I'm not sure how they apply here. They've been used effectively in the electronics field. I know that we did that in New Jersey, and that did provide a pool of money. But that pool of money went to basically establishing the infrastructure for electronics recycling. I don't know whether that's appropriate here.
Dunbar? Wanna give us your initial thoughts on where we should head?
Well, it seems like early on, we're not going to have the load to have to build a facility. I wonder if there's a way that we can form a partnership with nearby states with similar, to build one facility that's shared for a while as we get going, and then learn from that and hopefully bring costs down. I don't know.
And again, are you thinking an EPR, an advanced recovery fee, or a government subsidized insertion of cash for incentives?
Well, so it sounds like adding a new fee is going to hurt the installer industry, but I don't know if there's a way to put, or if that passes through, it's small enough for the clients to pay for that. I'm not sure. I'm not really. I mean, Lyle may be better off to speak of that.
And where are you thinking on the landfill ban?
I don't like putting them in the landfill, that's for sure. But I don't know. I mean, if that's the mechanism to force people to accept that they're going to pay for the cost of recycling.
Dave, I think you have to get off early, right? So
Yeah, thank you. On the landfill ban, I don't think we should advocate a landfill ban unless we have a viable alternative, such as a reuse system or a recycling system. I realize it forces things, but I'm not sure we're ready for things to be forced. I guess I would come down with some of the things that Jim Entwistle, I think, had said maybe last meeting or the meeting before, with respect to if you're going to finance a system, with respect to some sort of advanced or consumer-based fee. My view has always been that the cost is going to be relatively fixed. I mean, it'll change over time, but at one point in time, it's going to be fixed. And that the farther you move that cost down or away from the end user, that cost is going to remain the same, but it's going to get marked up as it moves through the distribution chain, meaning that the consumer will probably pay more than they should if it was just borne up front by the consumer. And I think what I'm hearing, that cost is much more important in the case of solar panels, the goals that we have as a society, than it ever was with e-waste. I mean, to me, the way we paid for the e-waste system was to move the production to China. That's what happened.
okay.
So that's my 2 cents for right now, I guess. I'm interested in more study always, I guess. And we've had some good discussion around that in terms of reuse and what that involves.
I'm sorry.
I know there was a lot of talk about reuse, earlier in the EWaste days, and I realized there was some good solutions, but there was a lot of bad actors. So I'm very nervous about the integrity of that system, I suppose. And I guess on the positive side, the solar panels don't seem to be nearly as, hazardous as a CRT monitor, for example, or maybe an older printed circuit board. So maybe that's a positive that should be highlighted.
All right. Chris?
I don't know where to start. Well, the first on the landfill ban, there's pros and cons to that, and I guess the timing of something like that would be key, right? But if you don't eliminate the ability for the panels to go into a landfill, then you're not really bringing enough material to market to have an entrepreneur go out there and create a way to recycle and recover the materials from it, right? So I think it's something that has to be considered, but I think there's got to be some thought behind how that is implemented from a timing standpoint. Reuse on the surface sounds good, but I guess as the goal of the commission is thought out, it really doesn't solve the problem, right? Because at some point, that material is still going to come into the system as a waste. It may not be a New Jersey waste, but we're not really fixing the problem as far as what do we do with the panel when it is no longer reusable. So I'm not such a big fan of pushing, what we may not consider usable anymore to somebody else to manage down the road. I think, from a regulatory change, I think if we push forward with getting these in the universal waste side, I think it's going to bring a market to New Jersey. I think we already have seen that happen with our consumer electronics. I think the EPR is another aspect that can be placed upon that to entice the funding of that process. I mean, it works in other countries. We've seen it work in Europe right now. So I think moving forward, the reuse and recovery of the precious metals will become key to these systems, especially as the mining of those metals is further scrutinized from a climate change standpoint, and the cost of those metals go up. So I think instituting something from a recycling and recovery standpoint will gain further traction, even if it's looked at as expensive now. I think over time it'll become more viable.
Stephanie?
Yes, I agree with everything Chris said, except that I understand that reusing panels pushes the problem down the line, or you're giving the problem to someone else. But if the alternative is making a new panel, I think there's still use and there's still an environmental gain from using a panel that has not died yet for generating clean electricity and offsetting more of our carbon footprint. So I wouldn't, I guess, completely discount it. But yeah, I think it's hard to come up with suggestions when you think about without parameters on how much should we emphasize the environmental impact. If the cost is going to the consumer, I mean, there's no, I guess they got credit for using these solar panels and generating clean energy, but there's right now, I think there's not really a penalty system for releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. And if that happens, it can really change the math of all of this. So I don't know, I guess for me, what I would probably do is come up with a few suggestions based on different scenarios, looking at from resource perspective, like Chris mentioned about these rare minerals, that's going to be a huge problem in the future. Then looking from an environmental perspective, if we really did, calculate the cost somehow in respect to climate change, the cost would be huge. And then from, I guess, the economic perspective of how much does it actually cost us to recycle these panels? If it's only about cost, I mean, it's not really viable. It's never going to be profitable to recycle these.
Yeah, it really is. Yes, it's very complicated, and I don't think we can say that our recommendation is based only on environmental costs or only on financial costs. And that's why this is so complicated, is because the commission is going to have to balance all of that and come up with the best of all worlds, or minimizing the worst of some of them, so, okay. Lyle?
Okay, so I have some thoughts that I'm sort of putting in a framework of a phased approach over time, where the first phase would start immediately, hopefully by the end of 2021, and be finished by the end of 2022, and that would be a study of the technologies that exist now and the economics for the solar panels, and have a thorough technical study. I know we've done a lot within this commission, but we're all doing it on a volunteer basis. But a comprehensive study of the technology worldwide, I think would be, and the economics of same, would be a good first step. And then the second suggestion would be that the state should establish a recycling facility in the state as a phase one recycling facility that would just remove the aluminum frames, because that's extremely simple to do. It's just that there isn't a place to do it right now. And it should be done with specialized equipment. It's really cheap, simple equipment, but specialized equipment that would, the frame is in 4 pieces. So it's just about taking those 4 pieces apart. It's ultra simple, but you do need equipment to do it. So the suggestion would be to mandate the opening of a phase 1 recycling facility just to remove the aluminum frames by 2024. That would be very inexpensive. The cost should not be very much at all to send modules there, and the aluminum is easy to remove and easy to recycle, and it's valuable. So the cost may even be zero when the value of the aluminum is taken into place to do that. Then, as a third phase, to establish by the year 2030 a full recycling facility with whatever technology is available by that time, which hopefully that time more of the materials can be economically recyclable through new technology, and as well greater market value for the metals that are contained. So mandate that by 2030, whatever best technology is available by that time is embodied in a more sophisticated full recycling facility in New Jersey. Now, all of this kind of implies legislation because it implies cost, and so legislation would be needed to, establish that. As part of that, well, wait, I'm going to get to that later. The fourth recommendation would be, once a full recycling facility opens with a target of the year 2030, and that's when much larger volumes start to be seen coming in, most likely coming into the waste stream. so it corresponds with large volumes being available. If at that point there's still a cost to the recycling, that a fee be established for developers and owners of solar systems that would be paid before construction to go into a fund. So that would have to start several years earlier than 2030, perhaps 2025 or thereabouts, begin charging a fee to developers and owners to go into a fund to pay the cost of this recycling. If things go great and the technology progresses enough and the value of materials, maybe that cost will be little or none. But it's probably prudent to start establishing a fund for that purpose. And fifth recommendation would be a problem that seems to be related to this, which is when you crush solar panels or granulate them, what is currently encapsulated, so that if there is lead or some other metal that you don't want, any cadmium in the case of the very small amount of first solar panels that are out there, the solar panels are ingeniously designed to encapsulate everything in order to operate well over a 30 to 40 year period of time. Once you crush it, you're opening up all of that encapsulation so that you've destroyed that ability to not only keep the module operating, but also encapsulate any metals in there. So it's best to leave the panels uncrushed to the greatest degree possible. Even if they're cracked, most of the encapsulation is still intact. So the recommendation would be to consider a dedicated facility within the state for solar panels at end of life that doesn't crush them, but after the aluminum is removed, to just stack them and have a liner at such a facility to, if anything does escape, to make sure it doesn't leak into the environment. But with aluminum removed and then stacked, they take up very little room. It's an extremely volume efficient way to do it. But leaving that encapsulation in place to the greatest degree possible instead of, mixing them with other waste. And I would propose that such a facility be established sometime between now and the year 2030, perhaps by 2025 or something like that. That will minimize any potential environmental release from the solar panels. So essentially, and the other thing is, by segregating the solar panels in their own dedicated facility and not crushing them, it gives you the greatest opportunity in the future to take advantage of any new technology that comes along. And you could then go into that, essentially it would be not just a disposal facility, but also a storage facility, so that when new technology comes along that's more economic, you then have solar panels segregated, stacked, neatly, easy to ship, to any new technology recycling center. So that's it. And I think all of this is necessary because even if we do everything possible for reuse and continued use, there's still going to be some that are just not going to be suitable for that have to be disposed of. And so this would optimize whatever cannot be reused or subjected to continued use. I think the reuse and continued use should be the first preference. And to that end, I think another recommendation would be to establish a statewide entity that could be an authority or a private entity chosen competitively to coordinate and and facilitate this reuse or continued use, and that entity, whether private or a governmental authority or quasi-governmental authority, could do the job of testing the panels, making sure, as Aisha said, that it meets standards for power output and is otherwise suitable, to aggregate and approve companies that would be that would be entrusted and skilled in disassembling solar arrays, packing them up, and readying them for shipment for reuse, and to help seek out markets and potential projects in places, whether in the U.S. or overseas, and facilitate the designing and building of these new projects that would reuse the panels. There's going to be a cost involved in doing all this for reuse and continued use. So I haven't really thought it out yet, but some kind of mechanism to establish a fund to help pay for the cost of, all of the foregoing. And that's it so far. And I haven't really gotten a lot of detail down to a whole level of detail on these, but still working on that.
And when you said establish a fee to be paid by developers and owners.
Sorry, you were breaking up, Karen. I couldn't.
When you say fee to be levied for developers and owners, developers, I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, so there's kind of two parts of the solar industry. One is where property owners buy solar panels for themselves, whether it be on the roof or on the ground. And the other part, which is the larger part, is third parties develop projects with a power purchase agreement arrangement with the property owner. So the property owner doesn't own the solar array, a developer owns the solar array and sells the power. So so the owner would be that direct purchase side of it, and the developer would be that third party ownership part of it. So you need to get a fee from both.
Okay. Dan? Dan, do you have anything you'd like to talk about, what you're thinking, where we should head?
I think, especially after the NERC webinar last week, I think prior to that, I was really thinking EPRs would be the way to go of some form, while recognizing the challenges of that and, that it would be a lot harder to administer than, say, EWaste, especially because we already have so many panels out there. We don't know necessarily who produced them or, how you would attribute responsibility to a producer for those. I think, which isn't to say I'm against EPRs now. I do think that still is a viable option, but in terms of, I think, Lyle and other folks, I think everyone has, commented pretty extensively sort of on what the challenges are with that. And in terms of the funding mechanism and what shape that would take. So I think, if we could get through those problems, I think some form of EPR would be great. But I do think those are very real questions. Is the sort of the payment mechanism and sort of how to get that up and running. And additionally, too, just that what are the outlets for, what are the recycling outlets and what, how, if they're not available, that it would be, we shouldn't mandate recycling if there's no way of recycling them. So I think that's a big issue that needs to be tackled if we are going to go that route. And I do think now, in light of the presentations at NERC last week, I do think that, you know, really recommending diversion to me, and, you know, continued use or reuse, you know, seems like the way to go, while recognizing that, you know, those panels still, you know, are going to leave, everything's going to leave service eventually. So that, you know, maybe that's kicking the can down the road a bit, but at least, you know, trying to get as much use out of them before they end up in the waste stream at all, you know, including recycling, is sort of where I'm at. But in terms of coming up with a cohesive framework for that makes sense. I don't think I'm there yet, and I think, you know, other people have had pretty good recommendations that are much more grounded so far today in terms of what that might look like.
Yeah, and I am asking people to think out loud based on what they have learned and heard so far. I'm not buddy to anything. Nick Byer, do you have any?
If I could just, I'm sorry, add one more thing. I do think, you know, especially if we're talking about continued use, one thing that did come up during NERC 2 is that, you know, if we're thinking of continued use for export, you know, that one way to make sure that that does not lead to dumping, that did come up, was the idea that, you know, as a part of that, you know, with these exports, maybe then also providing funding to develop recycling or handling infrastructure in those countries where the panels would be exported to. So I think making that part of the terms of continued use would be an important piece of the puzzle that you could, you know, encourage, you know, gosh, that if we're going to be sending a lot of these to Ghana and they're going to be used there, but eventually need to be recycled or handled there, that, you know, coming up with a mechanism to provide subsidies for the eventual recycling, or to bring them back here to be recycled, you know, something, one or the other.
Oh, can I add something, please, Karen?
Sure.
Because I failed in reading my own handwriting, and that's an issue of old man eyes. But on the reuse topic, when I was saying we should think about a mechanism to raise funding, it was for specifically what Dan was just talking about. In order, you know, when something is shipped to another country, to establish a contract with the destination government to fund recycling in the destination country, because shipping it back to the U.S. is kind of a disaster, both environmentally and economically. So we would want it to be recycled in the destination country, but you know, we know it's not going to happen unless, you know, there's money to do it and some contractual relationship to force it to happen. So that was, I intended that to be part of my recommendation, that, you know, funds be collected also for the purpose of contracting with the destination country to recycle it after, you know, after end use has run its course. And of course, you know, the more time goes by, that extra 20 years or 15 years, hopefully will bring more new technology and better markets for the metals. So that cost hopefully declines over time.
Nick Byer?
Yeah, so thanks for the reminder, Dan.
I guess my only question I have is, are we reasonably sure that these newer ones don't have any hazardous characteristics? They wouldn't like fail a TCLP test or anything like that? I know we're throwing around some ideas about these, but because my group seems very concerned that these are all hazardous. So is there any documentation or anything showing that they've tested these and they're reasonably sure they're not hazardous?
I think we should look into that. I mean, I'm reasonably confident, but in terms of data, I'll have to look and see what the industry has.
Because if somebody has anything, that'd be great. I could share with my supervisor and put a lot of people's at ease that at least most of the new ones would be safer to get rid of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it depends on how they're disposed of, and it's really important, in my view, to not crush them to the greatest extent possible, and maintain encapsulation. That's very, very important, I think.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was my only question.
Yeah, Nick, that's so funny because when EPA came out with that guidance document or toolkit, whatever you want to call it, I expected it to answer that question. And I was really hoping that it answered that question, but it didn't. It really did seem to gloss over the fact that it could be hazardous, but not necessarily. So I think without having some level of comfort that we know exactly what we're dealing with, then it really becomes very difficult to answer what we should do with them. So that being said, let me stop talking there. Asia, what would you like to add?
I just want to make sure that each of these meetings that we are sitting here hashing out are the ideas, that we don't let our purpose escape us, and our purpose is recycling. It is recycling. Obviously, repowering, refreshing, reusing it, that's going to come into play. But each meeting that we have, I have not been more impressed than what Cascade and Echo was doing with their panels. I am all for landfill bans and modeling as close as possibly to the R2 standard and identifying the downstream markets. Those guys really put in a lot of work into identifying alternative uses of the materials that they were able to reclaim or repurpose or whatever. And I'm impressed by that. I'm impressed by that, and I think we should not allow that to escape us as we continue to think of our recommendations. Obviously, Tommy and Chris and Kurt and all those guys, they have an interest because they make money. But they did, touch on that about the high cost in recycling it, but with increased amounts of volume, that could be a profitable and lucrative market. So I really do think that it's necessary for us to try to model that R2 standard as much as possible, and definitely no landfills. No landfills at all. I'm really impressed by that.
Okay. And Scott Brubaker.
Thanks, Karen. I haven't been able to attend all the meetings, but really thanks to everybody for lending your expertise and time. I think this is about kind of biting off what we can chew at this particular time, looking at what we have, those recommendations that we have, and maybe zeroing in on a couple of those or a few of those to see which ones we could reasonably push forward at this particular time in the life cycle, early stages of trying to recycle these things, and then leave a strong open door for follow-up to this. I think there's a lot of value in what this group has done and the knowledge that's been articulated here that can help another group get off to a really good start, focusing on the right issues next time. So that's kind of my general thoughts without having seen the complete record here. But I'd like to see this group come out with as much, even if it's just a couple of really strong, concrete, practical, if you will, maybe recommendations, and leave the door open to some good future work as the industry matures and as time goes on. Because we are, for once, it sounds like government is a little ahead of schedule, that there isn't a big wave of this stuff coming in the next couple of years. So that's all I would say at this point. Thank you.
Karen? Oh, Karen, I was just going to say one other thing to keep in mind too. Our company and others have sustainability in mind, right? So there's a lot of greenhouse gas initiatives. Landfill waste, hazardous waste translates to high greenhouse gas values. So there is momentum for industry to not want a landfill right now and to find alternatives to that. So that is, we read about it every day from a state level to a national level. So just to keep that in the back of our heads. So there are competing goals here.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Chris, because part of that, the competing goals is going to be how whatever we do relates to cost, especially in the near term, as you said, Chris, when there's very little volume involved for a number of years to come. And the tension is going to be with the Board of Public Utilities and the Office of the Rate Council, who are tasked with keeping the ratepayer costs to a minimum. And any costs that are composed are inevitably going to land on ratepayers. So they're going to want to see that this is done in such a way to minimize the rate impacts.
Absolutely.
Nick Nader?
Yes, hi. A while back, I shared my recommendations with you and Dan. I was going to say, if you think that's a good idea, I will send those recommendations to everybody on the commission.
Yeah, I would just like you to kind of outline them now.
Okay. And before I do that, I suggest that maybe any of our members that are interested, maybe they can submit their recommendations in writing to you, and then so that we can sort them out,
Yeah,
review them and.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I'm wondering if we should focus on getting our sections done and then our recommendations in order to have a complete report at some point. As anxious as I am to get to the end, I'm not, I don't want to leapfrog too far ahead, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And lose focus on the supporting information. And I don't know if there's going to be something in these sections that changes our mind or steers us in a different direction. So.
So I took a different route, and that's my recommendations would be to have legislation to exempt management of end-of-life crystalline solar panels from solid waste regulations in New Jersey. That would be my, and I think we already touched on this. These companies like Eco Environmental and Cascade Eco Minerals, they seem to have a proven record of successful management of these end-of-life solar panels. So maybe the state can offer them certain incentives to set up shop in New Jersey, and they would be subject to minimum. Like things like audits, maybe annual reports. They would be required to submit annual reports, and they can be audited by the department to make sure that all material is probably managed, all the end markets, legitimate end markets. I don't know if do you have any other register every solar panel sold in New Jersey, maybe by scanning the labels. I think we already talked about imposing a fee on every solar panel sold in New Jersey towards funding end-of-life solar panel management. I guess our department would have to set up and manage the fund. Now, I don't know whether we ever got an answer on what percentage of solar panels sold in New Jersey now are thin film solar panels. Did we ever get to that, Karen?
No, I don't know that we have a number. I do know that it is a small percentage, but I don't know that we know.
Lyle gave us a number a few weeks back.
Oh,
about
yeah?
91,000 or.
Okay. Well, like you said, we are thinking out loud here. I mean, I don't know how practical it would be to maybe limit, discourage, or ban sales of thin film solar panels in New Jersey. Maybe that would be a. That's about it. That's about all the recommendations I had.
Thank you.
And and as far as landfill ban, I mean, I don't know, would a landfill ban have to be on a national level in order for it to be effective? I don't know that. I mean,
well, I know in EWaste world, we have a landfill ban, but not all states do. So,
I mean,
and some of the states who don't have a landfill ban do not have as robust a e-waste recycling program as we do. But there's no national e-waste.
Here's the number for you: 91,404 modules from First Solar.
Okay.
And that's about 0.23% megawatt. No, 0.23% of the total New Jersey capacity.
Oh, okay, so that's insignificant almost. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Well, and furthermore, I would add that thin films were a popular technology du jour for a long time, whose promise never really came to be, and so they've kind of fallen off the radar screen for the most part. We see very little use of thin films at this point. I would say almost none. So what got installed, that's not continuing.
Hey, Karen, just a thought. I mean, if initially changing the regulatory side, if we petitioned and got to a universal waste designation, I believe that you would create a market in New Jersey that doesn't exist right now, and that you would, the process may begin to just pull these out of, the landfills and the hazardous waste category. I mean, for us, for instance, I mean, we have a number of panels that come out of use every day from our pole installations. So, we would gladly like to, turn these over to a market that is something other than a hazardous waste disposal right now. So I have to imagine there's other companies that are similar.
Well, my counter argument to that is, I mean, there's only one state that has that program in place. That's California, and that program is in infancy. So the jury is still out on that one. We don't know whether.
And not only that, if I'm understanding correctly, universal waste. So that would mean like the scrap yards and stuff like that, which we are now starting to look into regulating these entities now. So it's just really creating another problem for someone else by making it.
Well, it would have to still be consumer electronics follow the same suit. So it would be a Class D facility. It would be permitted. And keep in mind, there's a number of other companies that are doing this nationally, because people aren't considering the waste determination to be hazardous of the panels. So it's already happening in other states, just under the radar, so to speak. So my thought is, I know there's already vendors that have an interest in doing this in New Jersey that have come forward. So it's just a thought. I mean, if a change in rule and a program set up that gives the ability for a vendor to come in and do things properly in New Jersey, I mean, it may just happen because the market is there and there's no competition right now.
Yeah, right. And I seem to agree with kind of parts of each of what each of you said. It feels like this really isn't ready for prime time, that there's not enough material, that the technology isn't there yet. And as Scott stated, we are actually ahead of the game in trying to plan for this. So this is a really great opportunity. So I like the idea of a phased approach as well, because what we need to do now, I feel, is different than what we're going to need to do in 2025 or 2030, because the materials aren't going to be there. After talking to ERI and listening to the webinar at which they participated, it does seem a universal waste designation goes a long way in removing some of the barriers associated with a facility entering a state and establishing themselves as an entrepreneur. Just takes away so much of the risk. But in order to go down that path, a universal waste has to first be a hazardous waste. So again, we're back to that very fundamental question. And again, I like the idea of promoting reuse or continued use, and in some ways that kicks the can down the road, and some may view that as a negative, but I also think in this particular circumstance, maybe it's a positive, because the technology just isn't there yet. And if we can extend the use, as long as we don't burden the receiving country with the ultimate disposition of these materials, it kind of fits with a very fundamental environmental principle of reduce, reuse. So it does seem like, and this is kind of what I've been chewing on lately, is here we're trying to solve a problem in the future, which again is not something government usually does. So what a rare and great opportunity we have here. But I'm thinking that a phased approach to address the immediate concerns, the short-term concerns, and the long-term concerns may be a appropriate recommendation. And maybe we, as Scott suggested, don't try and solve the long-term problems or the long-term recycling. Maybe we leave that door open for the next generation of people who need to deal with this. So, I kind of like that. Again, this, I'm thinking out loud, but I do think, the first answer we need to get is, are these panels hazardous? And I do think moving towards establishing them as universal waste would be a really good short-term solution to solve the most immediate needs. And then structure the report to talk about not immediate, but short-term goals.
Makes sense. Would that include a study? Because everything that we talked about could actually inform the scope for an RFP for a study.
Yeah, and I mean, as yes, I do believe that I'm not sure what form the study should take, right? So maybe our recommendations end with a request to the legislature that they establish a funded study to take a look at these very complicated issues and project into the future. Because I think the technology is so complicated and sophisticated that we're not going to answer these questions now. In some ways, there's just no viable financial solution to recycling the panels at this moment. So. Well, we are at 2:30. Does anybody have any feedback to what I said or what anybody else said before we close?
No, but we do need to pencil in our next meeting.
No, thank you.
Hey, Karen, I'll end with the last word. Just a question. I know the reuse does sound good for a lot of reasons, but do we know if those markets exist and where they exist for the reuse of those panels? And remember, we're going to be dealing with older technology as well. That's going to be coming out of service. So I think as part of the study, that may be a question that has to be looked into.
Yeah, it sounds like
Sounds
there's
like a heap.
some reuse in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, the
The
NERC
details.
webinar was particularly about Ghana, but it did, I mean, the US contacts were located in Vermont, and I mean, they seem to indicate that there was some market here, but then also, in other emerging economies as well, potentially in, other parts of Africa, parts of Southeast Asia, perhaps, and parts of Central and South America.
Is this a crazy idea to establish, is this a crazy idea to establish some kind of broker that manages that whole process? Like if someone has solar panels that are
in that regard, Aisha, I might mention that there was an article in I believe it was Bloomberg Press by Adam Minter, and he talked about Marubeni, the big Japanese trading company that has set up a blockchain procedure for tracking reused solar panels. They've got a very big interest in it. So obviously there's
a market for that.
That's something that is in the mill. Let's put it that way.
Someone could facilitate that. Well, we have these panels. These people need these panels. Let me handle that.
That's right.
Yeah, and Asya, that was.
Oh, go ahead.
That was the one of the recommendations that I made, is that there either be a quasi-governmental authority to play that role, or a private contractor chosen through a competitive procurement by the state to play those roles of aggregator, facilitator, and the things that I listed.
Yeah, and when I was struggling to think about how that fit in with this commission's mandate, maybe that's exactly it, right? Is a recommendation for consideration of some kind of entity to facilitate or even promote that activity and regulate it. In some ways, it's because it's a commodity. It's a private market driven interaction, and that's where I get nervous, as a regulator, because we don't like to stick our nose in private contracts. But maybe because this is new and developing, it is appropriate and it is necessary to ensure that the problems that we had early in e-waste, where countries were just getting dumped on and materials weren't being managed appropriately, and people were being exposed in these, you saw the horrible photos of children, disassembling electronic materials with no protective gear. Maybe we learn a lesson from that.
Establishment of a governing body.
Yep. So thank you all for this discussion.
Oh gosh. Establishment of a governing body. Thank you, transcription.
All right, next date. What are we looking at, Aisha?
We are looking at Monday, November 15th. And we are open 12 to 3.
Just FYI, I have doctor's appointments that day, so I probably won't be able to make it.
Move to the next week, November 20. No, that might be a holiday. Let me take a look. That's close to Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm. Not a holiday.
It's not a holiday, though. November 15th or November 22nd.
The 22nd is better for me.
12:30 to 2:30, 1 to 3.
Either of those times work for me. What do you guys?
I have a hard stop at something before 3 because of class. So the 12:30 start is
2:30
better.
is good.
That's good.
That works.
Yeah, fine with me.
Great. All right, so
Is of the puzzle to assemble next month.
You were cut off, Karen. I didn't hear the beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said thank you all, and hopefully next month we will have the pieces of the puzzle ready to start putting this thing together. And then the next step, as Nick suggested, would be everybody put their recommendations in, a very brief format, and we could kind of hash through them and see which ones work, which ones we think are immediate, short-term, long-term. But again, I thought this was a very productive discussion. You really helped me kind of gel in my head where I think this might be going, and that is very satisfying. All right.
Very
Thanks
good.
again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you all.
Take care.